Hi, welcome to my recorded presentation, something that could have been brought to my attention yesterday. The idea behind this presentation is actually that it's kind of all of the tricks and tips I've been acquiring about utilizing Google Slides since we went online, which, would have been really helpful to have already known prior to going online. So that's kind of where the idea is coming from. I know a lot of our schools are transitioning out of virtual learning, or they'll just be finishing a little bit more before going back, or have already been back for a while. But I'm hoping there are still some ideas in here that would be helpful even in things like a hybrid model where you have online students who are expected to be following along with the same kind of material as your face-to-face students. Um, so that's kind of the idea of where this is coming from. So I wanted this to be a recorded session so that it didn't take up too much of our precious teacher time, and you could kind of take what you needed out of it and watch it in the spare moments, as opposed to possibly miss out on one of those other wonderful presentations we have going on. So what we'll be looking at today is we'll kind of kick it off with just some basic Google Slide skills, because when I started, there was a lot I didn't realize I didn't know. And I know I have some colleagues who have still been struggling through it and, just rely on the copy and paste strategies. So that's really intended for those of us who are still a little bit uncomfortable with Google Slides. No, excuse me. However, if that's not you, then feel free to kind of skip ahead, look for the ideas for activities about 10 minutes down the line. And then we'll look at some of the different ways that Google Slides can be used to be a little bit more interactive for the students, be shared with them. And one of my major concerns was, how do I keep them talking with each other with the partner activities and things that they did? And so what were some of the different styles of the Google Slides that I would then send them off to a breakout room to look at. And then at the very end, I'll talk about some of the ideas that have, of course, been volleyed around regarding digital breakout rooms and how you can use Google Slides normally in conjunction with Google Forms in order to create a few of those to kind of add a little bit more panache and zazz. So without further ado, we'll kind of jump into the Google Slides. For the presentation, I'll be kind of hopping in and out of presentation mode, just so we can actually see some of this stuff as we do it. So in talking about the basics Google Slide skills, here we go, jumping out for the first time. One of the big things that I actually did not realize, I thought Google Slides, of course, had to be in a kind of a slide format, horizontal, this entire time. I started using Google Slides to make worksheets. You can alter the page dimensions. So here we go. We'll just make a new one to play around with. And we'll call this the presentation sample. Oops, started. That's right. I forgot how much it does not like typing when I am recording. Okay. And it'll just take me one quick second to get out of here as soon as I remember how. All right. Apologize for that. I forgot that my recording software actually has shortcuts that don't let you type. Kind of a short-sighted if you ask me. Anyway, we're talking about changing the page dimensions, which you can do with the page setup. And you just click on that, and it's typically on default always at widescreen, but you can kind of mess around with that. And one of the big things I did is I would just frequently make a custom that's 8 by 10.5. So it fits within our 8.5 by 11. And that will just give you a paper setup kind of opens up the possibilities of different things that you can, use to create it. In order to make some stuff disappear, multiple stuff at once, of course, you can do the drag. Something just to realize with Google Slides, if you haven't figured it out, in PowerPoint, you normally have to completely cover the item, so neither of them would be selected with this box. In Google Slides, it's actually going to select both of them. You only have to partially be in an item. Sometimes that works out to our benefit, sometimes less so. Okay, so that's also the drag and select in there. Arranging is actually pretty easy. So if you have something like a text box here, and I really like to give it kind of a border when I do these, and maybe I need to thicken it, so thickening it is these lines. Fill color, maybe I give it a light fill color if I'm going to be separating them out in terms of topic. But nice blue text, center it, do all the prep work on the very first one, so then I can just copy and paste. All right, and then let's say I'm doing something with a map activity and I need to make this correspond to my states of Germany. So, all right, forgive me once again for that slight probable hiccup in tone. I'm gonna have to remember to pause this and type in the background. But here I've got my first text box for the state of Bavaria. This is all the stuff we know how to do, and then I can just copy and paste that to make another one, copy and paste to make another one, copy and paste to make another one. And Google kind of tries to line you up with the idea of the red lines. You see them pop in and pop out. So that's great. Every so often I like to, if I'm doing a chunk, just recopy and paste, because I'm going to have to do 16 of these. So I am going to copy groups of 4, and that will help me out. Okay, so I'm just going to behind the scenes right quick turn these into my 16 Bundesländer. So we'll see that blink in just a moment. Okay, and we're back. Hopefully that was seamless on your end. Not so sure about mine. Okay, so I've got all my Bundesländer filled in now, and as we can see, they have differing lengths of names, and which is causing the boxes to run together. So kind of my next trick is actually to post, I kind of call it post my 4 corners. So I'm going to use the red lines to kind of move them into position. Most important that my corners are where I want them to be. So using those red lines to kind of help me out. Okay, and then we're going to do that drag and select thing, and we are going to check out this arrange tool. Arrange is really nice because it's going to let us kind of put everything in order. Align is just about lining them up, whether they're aligned by the centers. So let me put some of them out of whack as an example. Okay. I'm going to take all those and align them by center, or I could have aligned them to the left. Really, once they're all aligned, if they're all the same width of the box, you have nothing to worry about. We'll do the same thing for the other side. Align those by the right side. Where I've got the 2 ends is where it's going to snap into position. So that's a trick I wish someone had shown me a while back, because I have definitely been doing these the long way. I could center them on the page if I want. I do that a lot for my math lessons, not so much for this one, when I want an image to be in the middle horizontally or in the middle vertically. But what's going to be better for this one is distribute. Distribute them vertically is going to spread them out so they all have the same spacing between them. And so that's just the quick headache-free way of getting them all out there. Okay, so that's set up, and that's kind of my spiel on arranging and aligning them, distributing them. Next, just super quick, find images. A lot of people will, of course, search for images on Google and bring them in, or we have them on our computer. There is, of course, an insert image option from the web where you can search for it right here to bring them up. I could and see what it gives me. Gives me those options. Now, something to note is that we do not automatically have what's the term these days? Creative Commons license for these. So I like to use these for quick one because it's normally relatively safe, especially if it's just for classroom use. But for something larger, I actually like to take the time to show my students how to access the tools and the usage rights for the Creative Commons licenses to add that feature to their search. So that's just something I do for them, telling them that, getting them ready for college. That's something that we work with. Okay. And then I'm looking for one. You'll notice I added transparent to the search. Transparent is just a way to try and weed out some of the images that kind of copy with a background. So here we notice where these grids are. I'm going to have pretty good luck in not having those copy over. And I say pretty good because nothing's perfect, so let's check this out. There we go. Okay, so now I've got the map of Germany. Oof. Oh no, it's not super clear. I might tinker with the background a little bit, see if I can give it a background color. So click on background and give it a color here and see if that might make my country a little bit more obvious, and it did. So I like that. Then depending on what I want to do with this, I'll of course, go ahead and decide how I go from here. Do I want the students to be able to drag these items into the right area? And therefore, I would have a much larger Germany in the background. Okay, well, slight problem. It's not in the background yet, so can control click and this order send backward or send to the very back. If I say send backward, it's just going to keep putting it behind the last text box I did. But if I send it all the way to the very back, then it will be there. And students can go ahead and drag these into position if that's how I want to do it. But one other item that I was planning on showing you would actually be what happens if you want to kind of create a template and you want the students to be able to toy with it after you're done, but you don't want them to alter anything. So that would be a situation here, for example, if I were going to have my students draw arrows to the correct spot. So if those were the instructions they were given. So in that situation, I need this as a backdrop that they are not going to be able to change at all. So what I want to do is I actually need this as a picture. So I'm going to say File, Download as either a JPEG or a PNG. All right. I do not notice general differences between them, but I've been told if there's a lot more going on, stick with a JPEG. And if it's pretty basic, you can be safe with a PNG. But feel free to use whichever one you want. Okay, so there we go. I'm gonna open up a new slide just to show what the difference is, and I'm gonna get rid of those. And I'm gonna go back to that background bit, and I'm gonna choose an image for the background. So in essence, I'm gonna create this, or excuse me, I'm gonna place this image I just created as my item there. So it just popped up in my downloads is how my computer's set up. So I'm going to drag and drop, but you could have looked around to find it as well. Okay, and now we've got this wonderful thing. Now the best part about this, especially if you have freshmen or first graders, because I view them as the same sometimes, no matter how much they click on this, they are not going to be able to move any of these items. They can in the first one. So the first one can be a placement worksheet example. but they cannot in the second one. So this is one that they will have to be able to draw lines on their own. And I always like to do kind of one example one to get them going. So that aspect of being able to set up a background for your slides and then save it is what is going to be something that you can use for different activities. Like I said, it's all based on what you want that activity to be. Okay, so here we go, two options of the same. One of the last items I was going to talk about on kind of the basics of these Google Slides. So we've done a lot with these basics. If I wanted to share this with the students, what would be the right setting? And there are, excuse me, there are two main ones that you want to keep in mind. So first thing I need to do is I need to change my share settings so that anyone could view it. So as far as my students go, that would of course be within our school district. If I was sharing this on a broader scheme, like I will here, then I of course need that set that anyone with the link can view. And I'm going to copy the link. And in essence, what we're going to do, and we'll do that in the speaker notes here, is we hack the link. Meaning, when we paste it, we look at this section at the end, everything after the last slash with the edit question mark USP equals sharing. We're going to get rid of that. And we're going to replace it with one of two things. We're going to replace it with preview, or we're going to replace it with copy. All right. Now the distinction between the two is when we use the preview link, what will happen is that they will be able to view this only in presentation mode. So they would not be able to drag anything regardless. They would only be able to click on things, and if they were linked, then they would go somewhere, or they would be able to, excuse me, or they would be able to view it like they will a PowerPoint. So if we clicked on that, it would open it a new one, and it automatically opens it as a PowerPoint, or excuse me, a Google slide. For the other one, it forces them to make a copy. They can't actually do anything with it until they make a copy of their own. If you've done presentations or shared things with colleagues, you might have made that rookie mistake of sharing the link without changing the setting to this. And as a result, suddenly you have a bunch of people in there trying to change your original document, which of course I never have done. That definitely hasn't happened. But you might find yourself in that position. So this is the way that it makes it automatically open. What I also like about this is it automatically opens in the student's Google Drive. So it's already saved there. So no excuses about not, or no excuses about losing the file or anything like that. As soon as they click on it, it's going to create a copy of their of whatever document it was you shared. So those share link hacks are pretty important as well. Okay. All right. The last thing that will come up important for later is, well, I guess there are technically two items. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Last thing, we're just going to say last thing. Let's say that this was a more in-depth project and that students were going to be broken up into groups, and each of them were going to look at some of the highlights of the different areas. So each Bundesland had an accompanying slide that goes with it. Okay. And so let's say you are making one of these for each one. Each student's going to do it. For example, my German class tomorrow is actually working with some disasters and catastrophes, and earthquake readiness, so they will be making flyers that we can link together in the same document. Now, a lot of times when I do this, I'll actually have them make the flyer first if it doesn't need to already be there. But if I wanted them to follow a template, then I would, of course, make the template. So normally I would have them make the flyer first, then share it with me, and I'll copy and paste it all together, and then share it as a document that can't be edited. But in this situation, that's fine. All the students are going to be working. They're going to be talking about Berlin. What's the highlight of Berlin? Currywurst, of course. And, you know, maybe that parliament thing, I guess. So we'll put the Bundestag in here too. And then what our major goal is going to be is we'll actually link it so that when we view this in presentation mode, we'll be able to click on Berlin, wherever it may be. There it is. We'll be able to click on Berlin and it will bring us to the slide. So if that were the case, move Hessen into location there so he'll be out of the way. So what you can do is, my shortcut is always Command K or Control K. But you can also always find the insert hyperlink, and you can link it to slides in this presentation. So if they're already named, it already shows up. We can link Berlin to Berlin. We can link Bremen to Bremen. So now, whenever these are being viewed in presentation mode, when I'm over these, I can click on them to go on to that slide. All right, now something that you'll notice this might need is, how do we get back? Like, I can just hit the arrow keys, of course, that's always an option, or we just need some kind of symbol to go back. So maybe that's something as simple as a text box that says back. I, of course, like to use images, but okay. And what you do with these is you just create a link back to whichever page you want. In this case, the first slide. The best thing about this, if you create all your slides first, you can just copy this and then go to each of your pages and paste, and it will put it in the same location on each page. All right, so in the end, for all of these pages, you have a button you can click on to get back to the previous, or get back to the one that sent your way. Hopefully that's helpful. I don't know. An example of that is actually, oh, I apologize. I thought I had it up already. All right, we need the Stammbaum. Here we go. All right. Hopefully my colleagues don't mind me showing them off to you. But here, as an example, is a family tree project that my German students did, and they kind of followed this pattern. And then I taught them how, if they created a cover page, they could actually link to each of the people and then have a tree that will link back. So that way I could click around, and rather than just scrolling one slide at a time, I would be able to click on each of my family members to get me there. So that is something the linking can do. We'll also see a benefit to the linking when we get to the digital room part. Okay. So there's one other item we'll talk about, grid view, but we'll actually talk about that with the items on the partner activities that we can do. Okay, so moving on to the activities. So welcome back if you skipped ahead. The activities, so over the months, I've been trying to accrue some activities for students. First ones I'm going to talk about is just kind of creating rooms and vocabulary landscapes. And to be perfectly honest, I was a little bit disappointed in how long it took me to come up with these. Because when we're in class and we're learning the prepositions, we're learning them the same time as the house. And so the students will create rooms of houses. And I don't know why it never occurred to me, but I could continue to pass off the work and once again have students create houses. So they received different vocabulary lists, and they would have to create, using a Google slide, their own house. They could either find almost complete rooms and add some of the items. They could try and get away with a complete room, although this one did have a few items added. Or they could just create their rooms from scratch, finding the images, and I showed them how to search for the different items as well. So you can do that. You can also have a labeled copy. I typically had them label one as well. That could be used kind of as a study guide. But these are, I kind of started calling them vocabulary landscapes because they could be done with kind of any sets of vocabulary terms, so long as they represent something concrete. So this was one of the items. Something that you can do is it can be turned into kind of little personal check quizzes. And so here's one on different landscapes. And so we talked about how you can set this up and then save the background to make sure that they can't adjust anything you don't want them to. So for example, here, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot how I did that. So I had actually already saved this with the blocks in. So I've just deleted all the blocks I had, but I had it covering up the words, of course. This is how you become, like how you get your students on board with these. Create the text boxes for them to enter answers. And then save the image just like you want. So I didn't want anyone moving these because of course the answers were underneath when I put them here. So I saved the image, loaded it as a background just as we talked about. And then I went back over each of these and I just added a little text box back there. And if they're all the same size, then you can just copy and paste those text boxes as well. You don't have to worry about it. Also, these text boxes are kind of invisible, so you don't have to be that worried about it to begin with, because then when they just click on one to start typing, then it's already there. So as a result, when I give them this with that shared copy idea, all of the text boxes are already in here for them to start putting their answers. And they can just complete these and send it to you. If you have a learning management system like Canvas, they can interact and you can actually give them through a Google Clouds assignment. Or what I like to have them do is I teach them how to download things as PDFs to turn in. And the reason I do that is for twofold. One of them is I discovered at university everything that I did, even when it was created in Microsoft Word, had to be converted to a PDF before being turned in to make sure that the formatting stuck. So I thought that was a habit I could get them going on early. And then also with our learning management system, it's actually easier for me to open up a PDF and be able to mark it, like highlight things that are incorrect or circle things, than it would be if it came to me as an image. So personal preference on that one, but that is something you can work with as well. So that was kind of the basic one. This would just be the, identify it opportunity. Then you could have another option. They're kind of called the draggables, meaning that you are going to give the students something that they can drag. So examples of this would be, what would go into the different garbage canisters, like which ones go into the blue bin versus the green bin. For Germany, that's a big deal. Paper, separate from packaging, separate from food waste. It could be ways of grouping things into the evils of German would be der die Dasses. We sometimes do der die Das things to try and help them out. But you could also take this furniture, for example, from our virtual house and just have items of the furniture where they would drag them into the correct room. So an example like this that I've recently used is actually food. So an example with that is add to our presentation samples here. And in essence, we can just create the 3 little boxes. All right, this will be 1 with a nice outline. Like I said, I really like that size 2 font. I'll do another one. Okay, and that's right. Doesn't always like to go for the same spacing. But then I'll have a blue one as well. If I wanted to, I could even do a 3rd one. Let's see here. Probably should have measured my size first. All right, 3rd one is going to be red. Okay. That one here. That one here. Gonna highlight those. Arrange. There we go. Now they're centered. Okay. They're distributed. Okay. And I did forget, I actually did a text box for these. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit just for the sake of showing off all the skills. If I want to make sure that it keeps the size I give it, I'm actually going to want to do a square. And the good news is this, it can still be transparent on the inside, it can still have the borders, and typically speaking, you can still, they know that's what we're really using these for. Okay, so once again, I can set up my 3 boxes. All right, I've got these going on. All right, I'll zoom in so we can have a better idea what I'm doing. There we go. And then I will distribute these. So there we go, they're spread apart. I would really like those words to be top center. So I'm going to move them up there, and I'm also going to increase the size a bit. Okay. And so here we go. I can make these match the color of my box because that's the anal retentive type of person I am. All right, zooming back out, we see we've got the makings for a drag and drop activity. Now I'm going to add other words up here, but the other words I'll want to be able to move. Currently everything I have, as well as if I added some pictures, I would want to be stuck. So again, this is where we would do that. Save a quick JPEG or PNG of it. And then I'm actually going to delete what I've got to set it as my background. So it's the last thing I downloaded. All right, so now try as I might, I cannot move these at all. And that's when I can put in the boxes that I would like. Okay, let's see here, black, blue, red, so we might need a gold. Okay, and then here I would put the different foods that I would want these students to be able to drop. And I apologize, I'm just defaulting to putting all of these in German because that's what's in my head, but maybe I'd have All right, and maybe I would have spec. All right, maybe even a nice. So here I keep adding them, which is why the format's not changing. So if you want, that's also one of my tricks that I typically use. Just make a, monster amount and start moving those around. Stick with the number of items you want to include and then adapt them, and they will all have the same formatting. Wow, I just cannot keep in one language, can I? Right. What other kind of berries could we do? How about blueberries? All right, we might need some asparagus. All right, other fruit, or other vegetables. Carrots. So anyway, I won't belabor the point too much, as you are getting the idea. All right. But at this point, this is what I would share, and the students would be able to drag these into the correct locations. This doesn't have to be limited to vocabulary. You could, of course, use this for opinions. What are strong opinions? What are weak opinions? So every so often, I will take those. Our old textbooks were a really good resource of that, of giving opinions where students would have to determine whether they were pro or con. So I'll use that to have them not only separate them, but then also kind of order them, and they can do those with a partner in a breakout room, something along those lines. But that's the basis of the draggables. You first create everything you want in a slide that can't move, and then you save it as the JPEG, and then you create the draggable items around it. Okay, like I said, relatively simple thing. I'm sure many of you guys have already thought about it, but wow, that would have been great to have a training on before we switch to online school. Okay, on kind of the same thread is the Ratamal activities, the guess who or guess what activities. So something like this you could actually create using different vocabulary words or different environmental concerns, different household appliances. And in essence, the students are going to have kind of a guess who card where they both have their own. So it would look something, for those who don't recall what guess who looks like. It looks something like this. And so each person would have their own version, and they select one of the people that they can put a box around. Because I was lazy, this is all one image. So in my rules, the students would just put a, let's see here, Laura. They'll put a box around Laura. Make sure it's transparent because people are going to be asking questions. But that's how we know they've selected their person. And then as they are asking about their other partner's person, they can cross off the people who do not fit. Or I did actually have a student once that they actually keep tabs of all the people who are still in the running. And I thought that was interesting. Their brain clearly processes much higher than mine. But it's not just for people, although people is, of course, what I thought. The dream was actually to get the students to give pictures of themselves that then could be used because we also just don't have that face-to-face interaction. But that was a battle as well, and it was one I was willing to let go of this year because we've all got enough new things going on. However, it could be for ideas, could be for catastrophes. I work with my students where we play a little bit of taboo just to teach them kind of the idea of how to get around words you don't know if you need them, how you can still describe things. And so, and if you've ever played 20 questions with them, then those are all variations of this that you can use as well. If you have the time and energy to set these up as individual icons, you're a much nicer teacher than I. And that's a great way to do it, because then the students can actually drag the people who no longer fit their guesses off to the side, as well as having made a copy of their person that they keep on the other side. So that way they can, always, you don't see them looking at the kind of that half of the board or anything like that. That's probably much more thought than our students put into it. But long story short, there are lots of different ways that you can use this guess who or guess what item. So if you wanted to do one with school supplies about can you write with it or can you draw with it, work in the hobbies as well. So, and that was honestly, like, all of this work with Google Slides was that kind of stuff with the guess who was where I wanted to go. We were having so much less time where the students were able to speak and also have it be built up enough. Breakout rooms were always kind of a big fight for me. Normally I go in, it's just awkward silence. So they needed something very concrete to be practicing with and very laid out. So with the Guess Who games, there's actually combination of the rooms and the Guess Who games was the idea of cattle ship was born, which really does sound like livestock should be involved, but it's not. Cats, however, are. And this actually came from students who are working with the prepositions, where they like I said, they created a room. And so here we had a bunch of the items that we were working with, and each student got their sets of cats. And they did kind of some practice with vocabulary where they would open it up and they would have their partners place cats. So they could keep these cats off to the side here, and they would place them. You could copy and paste them onto the slide, or what's great about all these items is that you can actually have items off the screen, and that's okay. They just wouldn't show up as part of the presentation. But for our use, then the cats are there. You could say, okay, the black cat sits on top of the armchair. The purple cat is trapped inside the mirror, because, it's a German story. That's bound to happen. Okay. The Himalayan cat is in the tree. The black and white cat is in front of the toilet. And the devil cat, as the students started to call him, is behind the shades. So they did practice rounds with that, where they would then compare with their partner, give them the directions in German of where to put them. But then that eventually led to Cattleship, which is Battleship with the cats. And they would actually have to be asking where the different cats were located. And it was kind of like a much more complex way to blow off steam, really, of playing Battleship, in which they would try to figure out where their partner had hid all of the cats. So that was just another way to use those kind of guess who ideas to have them communicating with each other. The infogaps work on pretty much the same principle. So infogap activities would be activities where, and I'm not sure if infogap is really a common term, but activities in which you and your partner are going to be filling in information for each other. So for example, here's just some basic practice about asking your partner if someone has something. Do they have class tomorrow? Do they have siblings? Do they have a laptop computer? Do they have a lot of time? And so pretty much the idea with these is you would first create your entire template It's the word I'm looking for. And then you're going to decide who's going to have which information. And for that, I'm actually just going to recommend that you color code it. So partner A will be blue, partner B will be red. And like if I decide that partner A has those first ones, and maybe they also have that other one, and then they'll have then they'll have these two for Carmen, but they'll know about Pedro's cat, and they'll know nothing about problems, but they'll know Pedro has some money. That makes them sound ostentatious, though. Let's change this to allowance. There we go. Taschengeld. Less pretentious. All right. And there we go. All right, so I've spread out the information a bit. And then I can, well, I could actually just leave it in the black color, but I can also change it to red. All right, oops, not highlight. All right, now the whole idea with this is just going to make sure that I do not mess something up when we take it to the next step of creating the two versions. Because the whole idea of this is you do not have all the information. That's why you are required to communicate with your partner. Okay, so zooming back out. So here we've got the information split up between the blue and the red. Ooh, looks like red has a lot more information, so let me actually just tinker with it a little bit. All right. Okay. So the idea here is what you would actually want to do is to then create two more versions of this. And you can do that one of two ways. You can create them here in kind of your master sheet, in which you just create extra slides on the end here. Sorry, forgot the English word for a second. Or you can create your multiple copies already. So we'll be making additional copies of this, and whichever way you want to do it. But the idea here is that for partner A, I would now go through, and anything that's red, I would delete the red one, the red information. So a little bit of prep work on this. But I go through, delete all the red information. That clearly didn't work. All right, and that's why the color coding is so big. It makes it an easy check to make sure that you've got all the information and you're not going to have any blank spots. All right, for your other person, you're going to delete all the blue. All right. Embrace the slight cramping. That lets you know your double clicking game is on point. All right, so now we've got the two different templates, and we are ready to put these into new shareable Google Slides. So one way to do it would just be to make a new one. And then I am going to take the one I want, copy it, and paste it. All right, oops, I forgot. I was in that wrong page setup. So I would just want to adjust my page setup the same way we did it before, 8 by 10.5. Okay, there we go. So now we've got that information there, and this will be info gap partner A. All right. Sorry, I know it did a little time travel there. The other opportunity is actually just to make a copy of this. Make a copy of the entire, make a copy of the entire presentations. or select the slide you want and make a copy of the selected slide. And then this would be InfoGap partner B. Now you've got this as well. So you could share these with your students to determine a way. What I have done, if I feel it's a class that I need to share them separately, is I put them into 2 separate breakout rooms, put the share link that forces a copy in the chat of the breakout room, and then they have time to go through it and work together as a group if there's anything they don't know. And then I'll mix them up and put them with a partner who has the opposite sheet. The other option that you can that can be done is to have it shared differently with them through a messaging system. For me, that always felt like too much work, though. Now, so that's the InfoGap, and then they would complete this. They would add their own answers to it, so that I really like that column because that's what buys the time. So you have them in the 2 different breakout rooms, and they can work together with people in that group because none of them will actually be their partners. And so then they come back together. So InfoGap's another opportunity to use Google Slides. And then you always have this master copy ready to go. And these 2 ones can disappear if you need to clear out your files. All right, speaking of disappearing, going to clear out some of this. All right. To talk about one thing I haven't, which was the grid view. So there is a grid view. If you did not know, it's down here. It's right underneath it. Let's look at it in terms of this one. And for the grid view, what we've got is we've got this situation where you can kind of keep tabs on multiple slides at once. So there are times that you might want to use this strategy, just kind of monitoring, where you give each student a slide that has their name on it. So you'll set that up ahead of time. I had a bank set up for my level 2 class that, it was just the template, and I would make a copy of it whenever I needed to. And then you give everyone the permission to edit that exact same one. So you share the link exactly like you would for them to be able to tinker around. With the grid view, it's actually easy to see who's on which slide. So if there's any issues with a student trying to mess around with another slide, you can actually see it. There's also always the version history that would let you prove it if you needed to. So when students don't know that, it's a good lesson. And it generally doesn't lead to issues any more than once. Or they just get really creeped out that you know what they're doing. Then the other situation that's really good about it is that you can actually have students work collaboratively. I'll give it for a lot of students that are kind of the, you close your eye at the cheating, because it's not really cheating. They are checking in with another student, seeing what they wrote, because their answers are going to be different. So those are things that are like personal questions to them, but they might want to check out what someone else is saying. I've also used that with a trick where they'll have to interview a partner. So in essence, each student would have their own slide set up like this, and I like there's a layout formatting here. Oh, I am running short on time. I apologize for that. You'd think I would be better with it being pre-recorded. Okay, and so you'd have the student's name right here. And this would be their own information. And this would be their partner's information. So in this situation, what I'll do is I'll put them in a breakout room with one group, and they all get one question. Something like, how do you celebrate Christmas? And they all brainstorm ideas, and they all talk with each other, figure out what they need to say, and I'll check in with them. Meanwhile, the other half of the class is in a room with a similar but different question, like, how do you celebrate your birthday? Or what does your family do for Thanksgiving? and they'll do the same thing, brainstorm those ideas. So the idea is you're giving them two questions that are similar enough to each other that it's helping them prepare, but they are still going to have to spontaneously answer a different question. So then you partner them up, two people from opposing breakout rooms. They have put their information here, and then you partner them up to interview their partner. And they have to talk with their partner in the breakout room. While they're in the breakout room, you can keep tabs on all the slides here as they talk. And they interview their partner about the question that they had. So student A was asked about Christmas in the first breakout room. So student B was asked about Thanksgiving. So student A is still going to ask student B about Christmas. So the answer is going to be slightly different. It's always easy to tell if they're cheating because they'll sit there and they'll think to copy and paste despite the fact they're clearly talking about a different holiday. Then I'll ask why they, watched a football game on Christmas when there were none, or things like that. So those are what I mean about the infogap opportunities with Google Slides. So hopefully some of those will be beneficial. The very last things I have to admit, I'm not even sure if this is how it's spelled in English, is infographics. You can use Google Slides for the students to help them build infographics to make visual representation of information from reading, or you can use it for SEL activities. So for example, one of the items I've done with both German and geometry classes before is a bit of a number game. Everyone has to put 5 numbers on a slide with no other explanation about it. So here we go. Oops. All right. But the thing is, these numbers are all representing something about that person's life. So what they're going to have to do is end up in a group where the group is trying to guess what these numbers represent. Okay, and let's see here. So for example, one of these represents the number of pets I've had. One of these represents the number of siblings I have. They're kind of the same. One represents my soccer jersey number. Oh, sorry. Now one represents my soccer number jersey, which there are also special characters if you need them. More of a deal in math, less elsewhere. All right, one represents the number of countries I've gone to. But you don't intro with that. You just intro with the numbers, and it's a way to get your students talking to each other at the beginning so that they can kind of, little SEL activity, get a feel for the other people. So as with all my presentations, I'm unfortunately just about out of time, so I'm glad it was a recorded format. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was the digital escapes rooms, and I'll put it back into presentation mode for that. Digital escape rooms are completely possible with Google Slides, and a lot of people have been doing them effectively. A few libraries out there have actually put out resources, and in digging through the resources, pretty much the gist of what I've got is there's honestly no end to what you can achieve with them. If you're looking for backdrops, the Bitmoji craze has been great for Google Slide backdrops. Normally those Bitmoji classroom educators, they are the best source of some free templates, or you just search in the Google Slides there for backgrounds, and those are the items that I recommend. Remember, setting as a background image to make it so that no one can tamper with the background, reveal things that you don't want revealed. When you have clues, especially when they are linked in the room, you'll want to open them in new windows, because if you choose to embed a timer, because that's one of the great things about the thrill of the real life breakout room or escape room craze, is that you're fighting against the clock. So you can embed a timer from YouTube. You just search for the timer you need, and you can incorporate that. So if you do something like that, you'll want to make sure all the clues open into new windows. Similarly, Google Forms is really the way to go. So this one does require you branch out from Google Slides a little bit, because you'll set up Google Forms with clues, or that match the clues, and in essence, the lock will be the answer. There's a setting in Google Forms that allows you to create a next section, but it will stop anyone from going to the next section if they do not have the clue. So that's one way to do it. The other way is you have students gather clues in which the order doesn't matter, and then they just have to bring them all together in the end. For your information, if you've never dealt with the breakout boxes or breakout rooms, there are lots of different types of locks. There are color-coded locks, numerical locks, combination locks, alphanumeric locks, and of course the old traditional key. And all of those, with the exception of the key, could be created. And I did see a clever use of the key in which the image of the key just had the code phrase that had to be typed in into the lock. And one of the best uses for it was to use them as legitimate checks on the actual information. And so incorporate open-ended questions about the content you've been working with. These won't be used to unlock anything, but they'll kind of be used as items as a pass-through gate as they go on to the next set of clues. That way it gives you a little bit more qualitative feedback, I suppose, is what I'm going for. When it comes to ideas for clues, some are that you have the outline of a word where specific boxes are colored. So if it's an 8-letter word and then the third letter is in a blue box instead of the others, then that will be used for the code. You can use riddles to guide to hide hidden objects in the room. One of my favorite ways to start off is we have a partner school in Bremen, and the Bremen City Musicians is their big fairy tale of the area, which involves a donkey, a dog, a cat, and a rooster. And in essence, I just give the code phrase of like the yells of the animals, and then the students know that they should be looking for something to do with the Bremen City Musicians. There are diagrams. You can have them label diagrams, which works really well in the virtual format. There are digital postcards from a missing person, because the plot line is always a big deal about these. So if you have the items coming from someone who's been kidnapped or someone who disappeared under mysterious circumstances, you can, in essence, create digital postcards with just a picture on one Google slide and a second Google slide with the text in postcard form, and that, in essence, will be a clue to something else that they have to solve. There are definitely some great resources out there. One of them came from Teach Every Day, which just talks about how any worksheet that we would give in a classroom could be turned into a breakout room activity. So think about that. Anything that has fill in the blanks or matching or anything like that is a way to solve for a code. All right. I unfortunately don't have a lot of great examples of that, just because for the time of course, like I said, this is all the things I've been learning over the past few months, and I haven't really had the time to sit down with that. But I'm really looking forward to creating a few more of them, and then we'll have those to curate in our content as well. I'm very sorry that the last part of this presentation was so rushed, but like I said, part of the reason I wanted it into a recorded format was so that you could pick and choose what pieces were actually important for you. So with that, I hope you found something. Feel free to reach out to me via email at the email address on the first slide, beatty_charles@asdk12.org. And please enjoy the rest of the conference.